Hello everyone. Welcome back to Improved Version, a channel dedicated to sharing profound knowledge on holistic personal development through the lens of the world's greatest books. Today, we are going to explore a character who is perhaps one of the most complex figures in literary history. He is a man without a real name, a man who is simultaneously pitiful, hateful, and utterly ridiculous. In the original classic by Lu Xun, he is known as AQ, but for our journey today, let us call him Arthur. Most people who have studied literature are familiar with the story of Arthur from the classic novel, The True Story of Arthur. We have all at some point laughed at this character's antics, but behind that laughter, if you stop to breathe, you might suddenly realize that the image of this man is a mirror. He is a real-life reality that has existed in society for generations. He is the person who is both pitiable in his poverty, hateful in his ignorance, and ridiculous in his pride. The truth is, everyone has a little bit of Arthur within them. This is what psychologists often refer to as the AQ spirit or the spiritual victory complex. If you can truly understand Arthur, you can also recognize three fundamental truths about life. These are three truths that will help you reflect on your own limitations, your past, and your wounds, allowing you to rise strongly from the confusion of modern life. The first truth we must face is that everyone has, at some point, numbed themselves with the art of mental victory. Arthur is a man who comes from the very bottom of the social ladder. He has no real name, no hometown to claim, no physical home to rest in, and no stable occupation. In a world that values status and security, a person who lacks these foundational qualities will naturally be despised. Society looked down on Arthur, but the fascinating part is that Arthur wasn't ashamed at all. In fact, he considered his miserable state to be perfectly normal, even superior. One evening, after drinking 2 bowls of cheap wine, Arthur began to dance wildly and boast to everyone in the local tavern. He claimed he was a distant relative of the great Mr. Miller, the wealthiest and most influential man in the village. According to Arthur's skewed logic and calculations, his family hierarchy actually placed him 3 generations higher than Mr. Miller's own son, a pampered scholar. Upon hearing these delusions of grandeur, the wealthy Mr. Miller rushed forward and slapped Arthur hard across the face. He screamed, "Arthur, you're a bastard. How dare you claim to be related to a family like mine?" Arthur remained completely silent. He didn't dare to argue back or defend his honor. He willingly accepted the loss of his dignity in that moment. But soon after the sting of the slap faded, Arthur came to a comforting realization. He told himself that his own future son would definitely be much kinder and more virtuous than anyone in the Miller family. His internal battery was recharged, and he continued to be happy. He remained cheerful despite living a precarious, uncertain life where he never knew where his next meal would come from. Why? Because he possessed a magical psychological weapon, the art of spiritual victory. When Arthur was beaten, he lacked the strength to resist. He would simply wait for the attackers to leave, and then he would silently declare in his heart, "The person who just beat me is clearly my own son. The world is just a mess right now, and I am the elder being disrespected." Through this delusion, Arthur was able to continue being happy. One day, Arthur was arrested for a minor disturbance, but he didn't panic. He told himself that perhaps, in the grand scheme of the universe, sometimes people just have to be captured and imprisoned. It was fate, even when he truly tasted the bitterness of failure. He kept that same vacant smile. There was a time when Arthur was lucky enough to win a significant amount of money gambling, but the money was quickly stolen from him. To deal with the pain of the loss, Arthur ended up hitting himself. He imagined that he was the winner and the one who hit him was the loser. This feeling of self-inflicted triumph satisfied him so much that he fell into a deep sleep. In short, no matter what happened, no matter how many times he was crushed or humiliated, Arthur could always find an explanation that benefited his ego. He built a mental world where he was always the victor. In that world, a weakling like Arthur could isolate himself from the harsh realities of the era. This psychological victory became his key defense mechanism, the only thing that allowed him to retain the last vestiges of joy in his impoverished life. Some might say that because Arthur came from such a difficult background, he needed this optimism to survive. But we must ask, was Arthur truly happy? Was he truly optimistic? It isn't just Arthur. Even in this modern day and age, you will find many people who still cannot distinguish between genuine optimism, true self-confidence, and blatant self-deception. We all have a hidden Arthur inside us that leaps out to perform when things go wrong. When we fail an exam, we tell ourselves the questions were unfair or too challenging. When we make a mistake at work and get criticized, we say, well, I don't need this job anyway, or they're just jealous of my talent. When we see others succeed, we immediately dismiss it as just luck or family connections. When faced with conflict, we defend ourselves by belittling the other party in our minds, exaggerating our own tiny advantages to feel superior. These words of comfort might soothe our wounded pride for a moment, but they cannot deceive our true selves. Arthur's spiritual victory is a toxic combination of 3 parts anger, 3 parts resentment, and 4 parts self-compromise. The simplest way to know if you're deceiving yourself like Arthur is to examine whether your words are spoken in a spirit of growth or as an excuse to escape reality. It is always easy to inject a dose of mental anesthetic to avoid the pain of failure, but the easier it is, the more dangerous it becomes. This habit keeps us perpetually lost in a state of psychological slumber. We bury ourselves in our shells, separating ourselves from the possibility of true growth and transformation. Therefore, when faced with something that displeases you, don't just get angry and don't just complain. There is no need to justify your position with delusions. All of those things are just hypnotic drugs that lull you into a false sense of victory, while you remain stuck in the mud. The second truth we learn from Arthur is a darker aspect of the human shadow. The weaker a person is, the more they enjoy taking their anger out on someone even weaker than themselves. This is a cycle of oppression that Arthur participated in frequently. Once, after being beaten by a group of men, Arthur didn't know where to direct his frustration. He happened to meet a young, vulnerable person coming out of a local shop. Arthur spat on the ground and then reached out to touch the person's head in a mocking, disrespectful way. The laughter and attention from the onlookers in the nearby tavern only made Arthur more gleeful. He felt as if his achievement of bullying someone had been recognized. He pinched the young person's cheek hard until they ran away in embarrassment. Arthur's previously trampled on self-esteem was temporarily soothed by venting his anger on someone who couldn't fight back. He was extremely pleased with himself. The great writer Lu Xun observed that the truly weak are always angry, but they only draw their swords to confront those who are even weaker. We see this Arthur-like behavior in our modern world every day. We see employees who are oppressed by their bosses, only to turn around and show a terrible attitude toward the interns or the new colleagues. We see students being bullied by seniors, who then go on to make life difficult for the younger children. We see fathers and mothers who suffer stress and humiliation at work, only to bring that toxic anger home and yell at their children who have done nothing wrong. We see people hiding behind keyboards, venting their feelings of inferiority by cruelly criticizing strangers online. Even in our own lives, we often maintain a mask of utmost politeness with strangers. Yet, we easily lose our temper with those closest to us, our family and partners. This is the exact manifestation of the Arthur spirit. Psychologically, this is called misguided compensation. People always feel a deep-seated need to be in control of their own lives. When a person is pressured or suppressed by a source they cannot resist, like a powerful boss or a rigid system, that feeling of control is stripped away. To restore their psychological balance, they search for a way to feel powerful again. If they lack emotional intelligence and the ability to address the root of the problem, they choose a misguided path. They project their negative emotional energy onto a safer target. This provides a temporary sedative, a moment where they feel like the strong one again, but it does nothing to address the actual source of their pain. Instead, it perpetuates a cycle of suffering. This dynamic keeps people trapped in a state of perpetual anger. They are unable to free themselves because they're looking in the wrong direction. If you find yourself using these mental anesthetics or lashing out at others to overcome your own frustration, you must allow yourself to stop. Give yourself just 3 seconds. Take a deep breath and name the emotion you're feeling. Acknowledge it. I am angry because my boss treated me unfairly, or I am frustrated because I feel ignored. Naming the emotion helps bring that negative energy back into your rational mind. Once it is there, you can redirect it. Instead of spreading the poison to others, you can write in a journal, exercise, do housework, or meditate. The Buddha taught that anger is like a fire that burns the one who holds it before it ever reaches the person it is intended for. Only by looking directly at the fire in our own hearts can we prevent it from consuming the forest of our lives. A truly strong person is not someone who never feels anger. It is someone who knows how to channel that heat into a stream that nourishes their own soul. If you cannot change the wind, learn to control the sails. If you cannot change others, learn to master yourself. That is the only real way to escape the delusion of mental victory. The third truth we see in Arthur is that the more a person tries to show superiority, the more their deep-rooted inferiority complex becomes apparent. After his encounter with the young person in the street, Arthur had his first delusional fantasy about having a romantic partner. While working as a temporary hired hand at the Miller estate, Arthur saw a woman working in the kitchen. Without any prior relationship or understanding, he suddenly knelt down and made a crude, inappropriate proposal. His behavior terrified the woman, and she ran out of the house screaming. When the community found out, Arthur was fired, chased away, and completely ostracized. He had to leave his hometown with nothing but the clothes on his back. For 6 months, no one cared how Arthur lived. But then he suddenly returned. He appeared in the village wearing relatively new clothes and acting very generous with his money. News of Arthur's wealth spread like wildfire. He began to boast that he had caught the eye of a powerful official in the big city, and that he now had the influence to help anyone he chose. The villagers, being fickle, suddenly showed Arthur great respect. Arthur was delighted. He spent his days bragging about the wonders of the city, feeling proud that his status was now equal to that of the wealthy Mr. Miller. At that moment, Arthur believed he was standing at the very pinnacle of victory. But what was the truth? It was eventually revealed that Arthur had never worked for an official. He had merely joined a gang of petty thieves, and his job was to act as a gatekeeper during their robberies. When the people learned that Arthur had lied to show off, their contempt for him grew even stronger. This part of the story teaches us that those who are most desperate to be seen as superior are usually the ones with the most profound sense of inadequacy. Arthur used fabricated successes to prove his excellence, because his true self was too painful to face. In our world, we see this in the way people perform their lives for others. We like to show off where we've been, what luxury goods we own, who we know, or how talented we are. We do this to prove we are different, to seek the admiration of the crowd, and to get that hit of external recognition. But the more we use external objects to embellish our identity, the more we reveal the emptiness within. Truly experienced people are usually very calm. Truly confident people know how to be humble because they don't need your gaze to feel worthy. They shine with a simple, peaceful light that doesn't need a spotlight. When you live with clarity, you no longer need to wear the mask of superiority. The three poisons of the mental victory spirit are self-justification, lashing out at the weak, and boasting of false success. If you see even one of these in yourself, it is a sign that you're living in a trance of illusion. If you see two, you have become immersed in the mental drug. And often, once one poison takes hold, the other to follow, forming a dangerous trio that paralyzes your ability to face the truth. You might sleep with the feeling that you're okay, but you are actually drifting away from self-mastery. A person lost in the desert who drinks the water of a mirage might quench their thirst for a second, but it won't save their life. To wake up, you must dare to look at the truth. You need to change. You need to transform. When we realize that every excuse we make and every time we blame others is just a sign that we lack self-mastery, that is when we can finally begin the work. Instead of justifying your failures, learn to take responsibility for your choices. Instead of venting on someone weaker, find a healthy outlet. Instead of showing off to seek recognition, quietly cultivate your true abilities. When you're full on the inside, you no longer need the anesthetic of a false victory. The final part of Arthur's story is perhaps the most tragic and the most telling. In Lu Xun's narrative, Arthur happened to pass by the scene of a robbery at the miller's home on the night it occurred. Because of his past association with thieves and the careless, lazy investigation by the local officials, Arthur was arrested and accused of being the mastermind. The authorities wanted to make an example of someone to satisfy the public's demand for justice, so Arthur was sentenced to death. As Arthur was led to the execution grounds, he looked around at the crowd. The eyes of the people were cold, converging into a dull yet sharp aura. They were indifferent to Arthur's potential innocence. They were only greedy for the spectacle. Like a pack of hungry wolves. For the first time in his life, Arthur felt true, bone-chilling fear. He realized that his spiritual victories couldn't save him from the cold steel of reality. After he was gone, public opinion spoke ill of him, but not because of his character. Many were actually unsatisfied with the execution, because they felt a beheading would have been more impressive than the shooting. They felt their time had been wasted because Arthur hadn't uttered a dramatic, heroic line before he died. This is the psychology of the audience. Those watching Arthur mocked him and found him despicable, but they didn't realize that they were living off their own versions of the same psychological victory. They used their criticism of Arthur to create a false sense of superiority for themselves. They used his tragedy to temporarily forget their own helplessness and the emptiness of their own lives. The crowd in Arthur's story represents a collective oppression. It is no different from the toxic comments we see on social media today, where people laugh at the misfortunes of others to feel better about themselves. Therefore, a crucial step in your journey of growth is to learn not to judge or criticize. Arthur is a small character, but he is a giant. multifaceted prism reflecting the hidden corners of the human soul. Before we ridicule anyone else, we should ask ourselves, am I using a mental triumph to mask my own fear? Many see Arthur as a reflection of an oppressive feudal society or a failed revolution, and that is a profound historical meaning. But for us, here at Improved Version, we want to look at the psychological phenomenon. Life inspiration doesn't come from judging society or others. It begins with the courage to admit that within each of us, there's a little bit of Arthur. Only when we have the courage to look straight at that shadow can we step out of the self-deception. We can begin to live more consciously, more lovingly, and more truthfully. We can stop being the victim and the punisher. We can start being the masters of our own destiny. Thank you so deeply for listening to today's long-form exploration. I truly believe that facing the Arthur within us is one of the most important steps toward true freedom. If you found this discussion helpful, or if it sparked a moment of reflection in your own life, please consider sharing this video with someone who might be struggling to find their own path. Our mission at Improved Version is to provide you with the tools and the wisdom to navigate the complexities of life and become the best version of yourself. If you haven't already, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And most importantly, click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We release new, in-depth summaries and personal development guides every week, and we want you to be a part of our growing community of lifelong learners. Your support means the world to us and allows us to keep bringing you these life-changing insights. Thank you again for your time, your focus, and your commitment to your own growth. Keep looking inward, keep moving forward, and we will see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.